What is up, guys? Just a guy on my lunch break is back. Thank you for joining me once again. Before I get started, if you've watched a couple of my videos, please hit that subscribe button. It's a free service. Takes you 2 seconds. Hit that boop, hit that subscribe button, and I would really appreciate that if you were to do that. I'm gonna start with a question today from someone called at Jehovah-Litness. Sounds a lot like Jehovah Witness, which, hey, this is a judgment-free zone, man. I've said that numerous times, just like, oh, wow, there's about a 6-year-old kid, boy, might I add, riding around in a pink Barbie car. Like I said, no judgment. Oh man, that was a perfect segue into the judgment-free zone, the Planet Fitness judgment-free zone. No judgment, bro. You know, it's a pink Barbie car. I guess when you're 6 years old, you're innocent. You don't care about stuff like that. You know, it is what it is. I think I should help people with relationship advice. I just think I have a knack for that sort of thing. You know, I do talk about Kratom on here, but listen, I've been very expressive in the past about the fact that I don't want to be just limited to talking about Kratom. Especially right now, I'm not really doing Kratom. Haven't done Kratom in over 3 weeks, so it's one of those things. There's so much more in my life aside from Kratom, you know? And I'm a 47-year-old guy. Definitely would consider myself in the past as a person who kind of has a way with the ladies, so to speak. Not bragging, not patting myself on the back, but just to say I've been in a few relationships. I've been in and out of a few relationships. But as a 47-year-old man who has finally met, you know, the woman of my dreams, the soulmate, I'm finally with the woman who I know that I need, not just the woman that I want. And there's a difference, right? Right? You know, we run across people in our lives, you know, those that we decide to get into a relationship with, and we get into a relationship with people for all kinds of different reasons. Sometimes it's just because we're freaking lonely and we don't like being alone. I've been there, been guilty of that. I know people who have been there, who have been guilty of that. It's certainly the wrong reason to get into a relationship, but it's something we do all the time. You know, this person may not have a lot of the traits that you can really see yourself going after in a partner long term, but you can settle for that person simply because you don't like being alone. And a lot of people have been known to do that. I've been known to do that. So again, no judgment. But then there's all kinds of other reasons. You know, my first wife, I hope she doesn't hear this, but she was kind of a trophy wife. You know, I met her when she was really young. She was a virgin at the time. In my mind, oh, it's meant to be. It's meant to be. The Lord above has given me this beautiful woman, and I'm gonna make her mine. She's never been with anybody else in that way, and it must just be fate, right? I'm gonna take her virginity, and then we're just gonna live happily ever after, riding off into the sunset. And that's all it really takes, right? You know, that's all it really takes. She's beautiful, and I'm gonna take her virginity. That's everything, right? Wrong. That's not everything. There's so much more to a relationship, and there's so much work, so much more work, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into a successful relationship. You know, what really matters is not what the person looks like. You know, not the surface-oriented things on the outside, but is this person going to go through the trenches with you? You know, are they going to get down into the muck with you? Is this person going to be willing to go down in the valleys with you? Not just on the mountaintop where it's easy to be happy, but what about when you're down in the valleys? Is that going to be the person that is going to trek through those valleys with you, even when the going get tough? You know, when you think about the vows of a wedding, for better, for worse, you know, richer for poor, sickness and in health, you know, those aren't just words. You know, those are words and descriptions of phases of life, you know, and we all go through phases of life. Most of us have been poorer and we've been richer. Well, some of us have just been poorer and then some of us have just been richer. I mean, you know, not everybody has experienced both dynamics, but most of us have been richer, poor. Most of us have been sick. We've been healthy, you know. Most of us have experienced better. No, not most of us. All of us have experienced better and worse, right? And so those aren't just words. They're words that actually carry a lot of weight and are definitive of the phases, the seasons of life that we all go through. You know, is that person that you're with a trophy, or is that person someone who you absolutely can see yourself going through the trenches with, walking through the valleys with, through the tough times, through the sicknesses, you know, through the being poor, all that, you know, and still be happy in the process? That's what really matters. But anyway, it's not a relationship channel just yet, but I love helping, you know, kind of younger people. A lot of the people that listen to my channel are somewhat younger. I have been through well, a lot of people look at it, bro, you've been through a divorce, what the hell are you going to tell me about a relationship? Well, experience is the best teacher, and that is one thing that I can speak absolutely 1000% sure of. The best teacher is experience. And that first marriage, going through that marriage, and then that marriage falling apart, was one of the biggest teachers for me. And that is one of the main things that let me know that I was looking at all of the wrong things. I was looking for all of the wrong things in a partner, right? And this second time around, I got it right. You know, I got it right. My wife now is perfect for me. We're perfect for one another. She's the type of person that is patient with a hard-headed, stubborn, bullheaded person like myself. But at the same time, she's not patient enough to where she's just going to let me do whatever I want to do without any sort of kickback whatsoever. And, you know, furthermore, I want her to be happy. So, you know, when things start to unfold in a way or in a direction where I can tell and I can see that it is bothering her or disturbing her or concerning or worrying her, I have learned to step back, and despite my stubbornness and despite my single-mindedness and my single focus to do what it is I want to do, to step back and realize that, you know, there's someone else in this relationship, and there's someone else that is working to make this union and this relationship what it is. It's not just me, right? And when you get that and you have a person that's not willing to meet you 50-50, but 100-100, you know, you hear that all the time. You want someone who, it's not going to be 50%, 50%, it's 100%, 100%. And in fact, she's more like 110%, and I'm more like 100%. She is one of those that just goes over and above and beyond. But hey, she's perfect for me because she has taught me. You know, my first wife wasn't that way. She loved me, but there were conditions on it. She loved me until it got to a certain point, and then there were certain things in certain places that the relationship got to where she would withdraw her love, and she's like, okay, sorry, I just, that was the breaking point right there. That right there, what has just happened was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, right? My wife now doesn't have a straw that breaks the camel's back. She loves me regardless. Doesn't matter what I do. Matters to me what I do, because I love her and I care about her and I long for her happiness. But, she's been very clear to me in it for the long haul, But anyway, moving on. At Jehovah's Litness. I don't know if I'm going to read this whole comment. It's a pretty long comment. I mean, really long. So I may not read the whole thing, or I may split it up into 2 sections. But what I'll probably do is read a portion of it, stop, respond to it, then maybe read a little bit more, and we'll just do it like that. I've been an opioid addict for over half of my life. Started at 16 years old in 2007. I'm now 32. A few things. Kratom can be just as addictive as most other opioids. It's a double-edged sword by being legal. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday. On one hand, it keeps the users from traditional drug markets that are ripe with crime and violence, and it keeps you around shady characters that increase your access to harder drugs. On the opposite end, Kratom is never more than a 5 or 10 minute drive and $15 away. The extracts are way more addictive than the powder. Not only do they make it easier to get more of the active ingredient in you quicker, but often have higher levels of secondary compounds that are stronger, such as 7-OH-MIT. On top of that, they're not one-to-one, even when leveling the actives, as extracts have a much higher bioavailability than the powders. Now listen close here. When you take the powder, your body has to try to extract the actives out of it, which it isn't super efficient at doing. This is true, and I love the way this guy went into, or this girl, I'm not real sure. I love the way they went pretty deep into the weeds on this in terms of giving some knowledge about this. You can tell they've done their homework and really researched it. The more powder you take at one time, the less of the actives that will be absorbed from the dose. Extracts, on the other hand, are extremely efficient when it comes to absorption. For a rough example based on nothing more than my personal experience, I'd say 50 milligrams of MIT from powder is only about as effective as 25 milligrams through extract. So if you're taking 250 milligrams of MIT 45 extract, you need around 500 milligrams from powder to get about the same effect. Average powder is around 1.5 to 2% potency. So 15 to 20 milligrams per gram of quality powder that works out to a single MIT 45 black shot, equaling roughly 25 grams of powder. The math isn't exact, but it's close, and in line with what most people I've talked to about it are experiencing as well. So it's easy to see how these can get quite addictive quite fast. Also, have seen people who are taking 3 to 7 grams per dose 1 to 5 times a day switch to the shots, and then tried to switch back and still experienced withdrawals. But yeah, I agree. Switch to the powder till you're more comfortable, and then taper to the powder. Yeah, what a great comment. I'm literally about 1/3 of the way through this person's comment. They go pretty deep into it. But yeah, moral of the story here is, if you are on the extracts, if you are on the Kratom extracts, you will find that not only are they extremely expensive to maintain the habit of, but they really do play a large part in increasing your tolerance, right? And I know when I was on the extracts, you know, it's interesting because before I took Kratom, I've told this story before, I took Kratom probably a good maybe 2.5 to 3 years before I ever even discovered the extracts. It's funny because I don't know when they came out, but I literally think I could have just been walking right by them in the head shops and didn't even know what they were, because it's like one day all of a sudden I see this MIT 45 sitting there, and I asked the guy who works there, you know, like, what is this, you know? And he's like, first thing he said was, "Oh, you hadn't tried one of those? You hadn't tried one of the extracts? Oh, you'll like the extracts. If you like Kratom, you'll like the extracts. You should get you one." You know, just based on his reaction alone, my ass should have known better than to pick up one of those extracts, because the way he reacted, he was like, "Oh yeah, oh, you know, the wink and the gun. Yes, they're good." But of course, you know, that for someone like me who has a propensity to just love opiate-like substances, that same reaction, who should have scared me off, actually drew me in. I was like, yeah, tell me more, you know? And so anyway, I tried it, and from then on out, every time I walked into the store, that's the first place my eyes went, was to the extracts. You know, well, as you know, they're extremely expensive, but they're very, very high and very potent. And just as Jehovah Litness said here, they are very, very much play a part in your body's efficiency in being able to absorb the MIT, or the compounds that actually give you the high, right? And you can notice this. You can notice when you drink just a very tiny amount of the extract, you immediately, I mean, you know, for one thing, it absorbs faster, right? But all in all, it just allows your body to be more efficient at absorbing it, just because of some of the other compounds in it, and it's in liquid form, so it kind of hits you just like that. And you'll notice in 2 or 3 minutes, you're already like, damn, yeah, you know, yeah. Whereas, you know, the powder, for me at least, tends to take a good 10, maybe 15 minutes for you to really start feeling the effects. And then the capsules, even a little longer than that. I'm assuming it's because the gel cap coating that's on the outside of the powder, you know, that has to be broken down, and it doesn't just all of a sudden disappear. You know, your stomach acids and all of that slowly break it down, and as that happens, the powder that is inside of it slowly starts to release. So you get this kind of, it's coming on, and then finally after 30-35 minutes, you're like, okay, I think I feel it all now. You know, it's this all downhill from here. I'm at my peak, right? That sort of thing. But so if you're on the extracts, just like when I started taking the extracts, well, I kind of got sidetracked. Okay, so before I ever discovered the extracts, I was never taking over probably 12 capsules per day, and these capsules were less than a gram a piece. They were something like 674 milligrams a piece, which makes them less than a gram. And that's roughly, I mean, without pulling out a calculator, that's roughly like 8-9 grams, maybe something like that. 12 capsules would be. For the first 2 years that I was messing around with Kratom, that's all I was doing. I would take like well, actually, and I worked my way up to that. At first, I would take like a couple capsules in the morning, and I would take a couple somewhere around lunch, and then later in the evening, when I was at home and I wanted to get a little bit more of that euphoria, I would take maybe 4 capsules, something like that. So for the first couple of years, I was using the Kratom powder. I mean, I wasn't taking but 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 grams per day. which looking back on that now was not very much. I was taking a pretty modest, moderate amount. Well, I messed around and learned about these extracts. I started taking the extracts, right? And at the time, I didn't realize what it was really doing to my tolerance, right? And so after taking the MITs for about a year, the real reason I wanted to come off of them because they're so freaking expensive. Those things are 15, 16, 17, sometimes in some places $18, $20 a pop. I've seen them that high. That's for a little tiny little 2 milliliter, bottle of extract. So obviously, if you get into a habit of those and you're taking one of those every day, times that by 7. Now, imagine that your tolerance starts to increase and you're up to 1.5, 2, some people even 3 of those a day. You're talking about you're getting to a point where you're spending $40 a day just on extracts. Now times that by 7. There's people out there that were spending their whole salaries on this stuff. And, for me, I was fortunate because, like I said, my wife and I both make professional salaries. We make a good yearly income. So it wasn't one of those things where, we couldn't pay our mortgage or our car payment or something like that because I'm buying so many extracts. It was never anything like that. But I would absolutely just cringe if ever I sat down and was honest with myself and I started thinking about, and I did sometimes, started thinking about how much I was actually spending on these things. I would just shudder, like, oh my God. There were definitely times where I was spending close to my whole salary. Or no, I'm sorry, not my whole salary. What I meant to say was half. There were definitely times where I spent close to half of my salary on the MITs. And if I were in a different situation, if I had been in a different situation or had a wife that didn't work or was a stay-at-home mom, I couldn't have. There's no way I could have maintained that habit. But because, my wife makes good money. My wife is a salesperson. She is one of the top in her field. My wife is one of those people that if she was meant for a particular job, it is absolutely a sales job. She just very talkative, very bubbly type personality, very trustworthy type personality. People just want to do business with her. That's just the type of person she is. And it's one of the things that makes her really good in the field of sales. And she's been in sales now for the better part of 10 years. I think she's been doing it maybe 7 or 8 years now. And first working for Coca-Cola, for several years she was a sales representative for them. And now she's with an oil company. But she is always, when you pull up that list of the top salespeople in the area, you're talking about out of hundreds of salespeople, my wife's name was always in the top 10. Always, for every category. Sometimes breaking the top 5, a few times in certain categories, the number 1 salesperson in all of North Carolina, all of my state. So needless to say, she's good at what she does, right? So I'm a lucky man in that sense. It would be tight, but I could literally probably not work. Well, not now because we have a baby and we've taken on daycare and more health insurance and things like that. So I definitely need to work, but I could almost just not work at all and my wife's salary pay all of her bills. Now we wouldn't have any extra to do anything because, we live in a nice house off of a golf course. We have 2 cars, we have 2 kids, we have a hot tub, so obviously it would be tight, but point being, my wife makes good money. So when I was taking the MITs and I was getting to a really high level with them, fortunately, it didn't really hit us in the pocketbook that bad. We were still able to pay our bills. But if I was making any less, or my wife was making any less, or God forbid, if she was a stay-at-home mom or something, there's no way I could have done it. There's no way I could have afforded it. And so, you know, I do understand that an addiction to something like that, it is not selective. You know, the addiction does not sit back and say, well, these people make good money, so I'm gonna fall on this guy, you know, because he can afford it, and I'm gonna leave that little guy right there. Ooh, getting a little excited. You know, that little guy right there who only makes $14 an hour and he's only got his own income to depend on. I'm not gonna mess with him. I'm not gonna make him get addicted because he can't afford it. No, absolutely not. You know, it's not selective. And so I feel bad for, that's one of the reasons that I started this channel, because that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And there are a lot of people out there that get addicted to these things and they can't afford it. They you know, they don't have that, other spousal income and good income to depend on, like I do, and to kind of, you know, keep them out of the fire in terms of going broke. And so that's one of the reasons I started making the channel. But no, Jehovah-Litness, yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why people would get really addicted to these things, but then they had trouble coming off of them, because the more MIT it has in it, and put it this way, the higher it gets you, the more euphoria you feel with that product, the more addictive it is. Okay? More euphoria, more addictive. The lesser the euphoria, the lesser addictive it is. There literally is a direct correlation. If it makes you feel this good, it's at least that addictive, right? If it doesn't make you feel all that good and you're not getting all these crazy great effects from it, then you're not quite as driven to take that again and to continue taking it, right? So there literally is a direct correlation on how it makes you feel and how addictive that substance becomes for you, okay? Let's see where we're at. Shots a day, I definitely... Okay, they say I would definitely recommend tapering the shots a bit first, then switching. I'd suggest getting down to 1 shot a day, then make the transition. You could also try mixing the two during the transition. So say you're on 2 a day, switch to 1.5 shots a day, and mixing in 5 to 10 grams of powder instead of the last half shot for 2 or 3 days. Then go down to a shot, plus 15 to 15 grams of powder per day. I see what they're saying here. If you do this correctly, you can lower your tolerance while also transitioning to the powder. Since you're still getting the MIT 45, you can kind of trick your brain out of the withdrawal. Yeah, so basically what they're talking about here is a tapering strategy. They're just saying taper a little bit off of the extract, and then mix in a little bit of the powder. So instead of taking your last half dose of the extract for the day, mix in a little bit of the powder, and then, you know, sit on that for 2 or 3 days, then take a little less of the extract, but then mix in a little more of the powder until eventually you're just on nothing but the powder. And at that point, then you can begin to taper from the powder. I didn't do it that way. I just came straight off of the extract and then straight on to the powder. But I shared in my videos when I did this, you know, months back. Obviously haven't taken the extracts in a long time, but during that process, I still, even coming onto the powder and taking probably 15 grams per day of powder, I still had 2 good nights where I was in some withdrawals. Now, it wasn't like horrible, it wasn't severe, but I had a couple of nights after switching to the powder, even with it being 15 to 20 grams, where I was having trouble with some restless legs. I was kind of waking up in a little cold sweat in the middle of the night, that sort of thing. So, you know, that's one of those things when you transition off of the MIT 45s, you're gonna have to take an amount of powder that is going to compensate for that higher amount of the euphoria causing alkaloid, the metrogenine that you were getting from the extracts, right? Like I said, before I ever discovered the extracts, I was only taking 10, 12 capsules per day. That's probably 8 grams per day of powder. But then when I went on that stint where I started using the MIT 45s for about a year, when I came off of the MIT 45s and got onto the powder, I was having to take, 15 grams, 17 grams of powder to even have slight withdrawals. And then I was still having slight withdrawals. You see what I'm saying? So that just goes to show you what the MIT extracts can do to your tolerance. And Jehovah-Litness here did a really good job of helping explain how that process happens. So if you're on the MIT 45s, give that a try. Or try it the way I did it. Just come on, go on, bounce onto the powder, figure out where that sweet spot is to where you're a little uncomfortable, so that you know that you're lessening your amount, but you're not so uncomfortable that you can't shut your eyes for 5 days straight at night, or that you're, completely having diarrhea and just extremely sick, which with Kratom, my experiences with it, I guess because I've never been on like a really, really massive amount of it, my experiences were always that it isn't quite as bad as like pain pills. I'm sure it's not as bad as like heroin and, fentanyl withdrawal that you would experience from some of those heavier narcotic, opiate-like substances. But hey, it's no walk in the park either, bro. And a lot of people think just because it's legal that, it can't be that bad. It can't be bad withdrawals. No, it can be. And I also share in some of my previous videos how I quit cold turkey the MITs the first time that I quit the MITs. I quit cold turkey, and I didn't sleep for right at 2 weeks, literally. I may have shut my eyes and slept for 30 minutes, couple of times, couple of nights during that 2-week period. And so the withdrawals were pretty intense. And to someone who has never been through any sort of opiate withdrawal, it can be a pretty big ordeal. Someone like me who's been through withdrawal cold turkey from like Percocets and Vicodins and stuff like that back in the day, I have something to relate it to. And I can say it's bad, but it's a different kind of bad. And it's not quite as intense in terms of the physical withdrawals. But I also was not taking an asinine amount of Kratom either. So I've heard from people who were on, 40, 50, 100 grams a day. I've heard that the withdrawals from something like that can be significantly more severe and intense. Anyway, I gotta go, guys. If you have a relationship thing that you want to ask me about and see what my thoughts are on that, drop a comment just for fun, just for shits and giggles, and I'll let you know what I think about it and give you some advice on it. Thank you to Jehovah-Litness for your comment. There's also some of this comment still remaining. I may read some of it tomorrow, but anyway, I gotta go. Gotta call my wife. I just had a missed call from her, but love you guys. Hit that subscribe button if you've not. Like the video and leave a comment and let me know what your story is. All right, guys. Peace.